And the XL back with another NFXL podcast looking at the positional rankings ahead of the 2026 NFL draft after the combine. This is so. This is a post-combine update, and I'm looking at offensive tackles with just over 6 weeks until the draft takes place. Let's have a look at how this class is shaping up. Well, I've moved Spencer Fano out of offensive tackle into interior lineman as his arm measurements at the combine may lead him to being moved to a guard from offensive tackle in the NFL. So I've moved him across to that list. What that does do is gives Francis Mauigoa a firm grip on the offensive tackle one spot in this draft, and he sits at 4 overall on my big board. The next 5 will be competing for mid to late round one spots. Um, eight teams look to have pressing needs at offensive tackle after day one of free agency. So how many of these ended up going in round one could depend on how active the free agent market is in the coming week. And there's still half a dozen very good free agents still available. So that could decide how many of this group have that I'm talking about go in round one. And that group consists of Caden Proctor of Alabama, who's 19 on my big board, Caleb Loma of Utah at 24, Georgia's Monroe Freeling at 25, Blake Miller of Clemson at 28, and finally Arizona State's Max Iheanacho at 39. Now there's 5 guys competing to get into round one there. I suspect somewhere between 3 and 4 will actually end up making it into round one, depending on what happens in free agency. After that, we're then looking at the next group, um, which is sort of the round. There's only 2 or 3 more. Well, 2 really. Jennings Dunker of Iowa at 58 and Caleb Thielen of Northwestern at 75. Um, that stand a good chance of trying to land starting roles or close to it in this draft. Then we get to guys that are potentially looking at more backup roles unless 1 or 2 of them move up out of this group. So we're looking at Austin Barber of Florida, who's 98 on my big board, but I can see him sliding out of round 3 territory into round 4. Trey Zoon of Texas A&M is at 112 on my big board. Markel Bell of Miami is at 117. Brian Parker of Duke at 123. Kentucky's Jalen Farmer at 124, Drew Shelton of Penn State at 125, and Cage Casey of Boise State at 128, all looking like potential round 4 candidates to me, and therefore more as backups when they join the NFL. Beyond that, there's still more to come, but now we really are starting to get into the depth guy territory. Isaiah Wells of Oregon, his draft stock is just tumbling by the day. Um, not a good sign for him at this stage. He's 137 currently on my big board. Demetrius Crownover of Texas A&M is at 138. Boston College's Jude Bowery at 139. J.C. Davis of Illinois at 146. Emil Wagner of Notre Dame at 154. So that's the next group, if you like. And then if we then there's a gap of 25 spots to Keegan Trost of Missouri at 179, and then a further drop of 37 spots as we really get to the late round guys trying to make it into this draft. Fernando Carmona of Arkansas at 216, Diego Pounds of Ole Miss at 229, Fat Alili Fatamo of Wake Forest at 235, Carver Willis of Washington at 240, and Alex Harkey of Oregon at 249 are the ones that make it into my current top 250 on my big board. So as I say, once you get beyond the top 8, the rest may be looking at getting backup roles and then more deep, even deeper on depth charts. But with up to 6 more teams making 20 plus good openings between free agents in this draft class. So, like I said, there's a fair number. There's still half a dozen free agents, so there could be up to 14 decent spots here. So I've stopped at 10 and at 18. But if I were picking others out, Markel Bell, Jalen Farmer, Cage Casey might be the ones on the up, as it were. So there is hope for these guys to get decent positions on NFL rosters. But the top 8 certainly look like they've got a good chance. But after that, we could see demand drop off a cliff after day 2 in this draft. That's how I see the offensive tackles right now. I'm playing with this curtain, by the way, so See, because I get half a face. Bright sunshine in the UK. Who'd have thought it? Right, in March. But anyway, there we are. So that's offensive tackles. Next, I'll turn to the defensive side and I'll start with the defensive tackles and nose tackles for that matter. So I'll group them all together under the DT banner. They'll be up next. See you soon.